Hey, thank you for coming in to Facebook. Hey, everyone. I want to welcome you to Black Like Me Live. Many of you know that for about 4 years, no, I guess I should say 4 seasons, feels like 4 years, we've created about 100 podcast episodes. And about a month ago, I said, you know what? I want to take this live. I want to be able to handle and talk about some of the current issues because between getting a guest scheduled, recording it, editing it, producing it, and then uploading it, that could be a turnaround of 4 weeks. And sometimes I just need to catch people who have interesting insights, interesting careers, and they're doing things that's really lifting our community, our meaning the African American community. And so today is no deviation from that. My guest is Dr. Shaun Fletcher. He's assistant professor of public relations at San Jose State University. Sharp brother, his Bachelor of Science is from San Jose State University, Masters of Arts from the University of Central Florida, and his PhD from Howard University. Dr. Fletcher joined the School of Journalism and Mass Communication at San Jose State University in the fall of 2018 as a professor of public relations. And he serves as the faculty advisor for the Public Relations Student Association of America. Excuse me. Prior to coming to San Jose State, Dr. Fletcher served as the manager of internal communications at Apple for the Retail Learning and Development Organization. And in this role, he provided overall strategic communications and marketing plan development. He connected with departments missions and his over 65,000 retail employees globally. And so this gentleman has done a whole lot in this community. I've known him since he was a young man, probably in high school on his way to college. And he's just doing great things in the academy. And I connected with him a few weeks ago and just said, man, my thinking was I really like getting brothers who are in higher ed to just talk about their lives or aspirations, who encourage them, who mentors them. Then all of this stuff went down in the world. And so part of my talk tonight with Dr. Fletcher is just two brothers checking in on each other because a lot is going on. So what I said in the tagline, Dr. Fletcher, is that at some point we're going to check in on Black men's mental and emotional health. So I know we talked about that when we saw each other about a year or so ago. And the other thing is just American stress, just the stress that's coming down, but just being brothers on the grind in America. So Dr. Fletcher, welcome to Black Like Me Live, man. I'm so glad to have you here.
It is a pleasure to join you officially, at least, because you and I, like you said, we go way back.
We do.
We go way back. When both of us were a little less gray.
Right.
Mine in the beard and yours up top.
I'm telling you, man.
But I have seen your work, and I have, again, as I've told you before, I've admired your work.
Thank you.
I'm glad that we've come full circle and we can have this type of important conversation. So thank you for having me.
Man, gladly. When I do the podcast, I have Black icebreakers, but I want the live to have its own twist. And so I asked my Black guest this question. If you could be white for a day, and again, I developed this before all this other stuff erupted. So excuse me if it seems insensitive, but still interesting. If you could be white for a day, you could be white for a day, what would be the first thing you do?
The first thing I would do if I could be white for a day. You know what? I've spent so much of the last couple of weeks asking people if they could be Black for a day, would they take it? So you flipped it on me.
Would you take it? Would you take it?
If I could be white for a day, the sociologist in me would say yes, because I want to see how people would treat me. I want to see how people would treat me. I want to be able to, if you're telling me that I could come back.
Yeah, you can come back.
Black again?
No, I'm not going to
do it. Expires.
Whiteness. No, I wouldn't do that to you, brother.
So it expires. So I turn into a pumpkin at midnight, right? So if I turn into a pumpkin at midnight and come back to my original.
You turn black like me.
I turn black. Yeah, I turn black like you. It would be fascinating to be able to see if this thing that we call white privilege is as substantive and impactful as it is. And I would venture to say that it is. Even in 24 hours, I would likely see some remnant, provided that you're not taking my perspective of being Black from me, and I still could juxtapose the two.
You must juxtapose.
You must. Juxtaposition is important. So I would venture to say that in that 24 hours, I would likely learn quite a bit about what we call white privilege. So the first thing that I would do, quite honestly, is I would step outside. I would have a conversation with the police. And I mean current time you're talking about.
I'm
If
talking
you're
about
telling
current
me
time.
today,
Come on, talk to me.
I would step outside and I would walk up to them and I would see what their reaction is. And again, with no hostility, with no signs in my hand per se, I just want to see what their initial reaction is. Would they take a step back like they do now, as
Right.
me as being a black man? Would they take a step back initially to gauge the situation? Or would they be a little bit more at ease? I'd venture to say that we know the answer to that.
Definitely, man. Definitely. Um, are you working at home? I know you're a professor of public policy at San Jose State. Um, have you been completely off campus working in your home, or?
So around March 18th, we received a mandate shortly before because I'm in San Jose, shortly before the Santa Clara County Public Health Office put the shelter in place mandate on us. We received a notification from our university saying basically halt all of your activity until further notice. Don't come to campus. Basically, we'll get to you. Don't come to us.
Okay.
And we were then alerted the next day that we had the rest of the week. This was a Tuesday. We had the rest of the week to reconfigure all of our curriculum to being online completely, not asynchronous, not hybrid, online completely, and be ready Monday morning, bright and early, to execute on all of that. So we've been teaching at home up until when the semester ended last week or week before last. We've been at home exclusively.
Man, and do you teach intro classes? You're working with upperclassmen, but who are your students?
The whole gamut. I teach graduate school. I primarily teach undergrad. So I teach the advanced public relations and sport communication courses. I teach undergrads, mainly juniors and seniors. The tenure track faculty, they usually reserve those for the upper level courses. They'll bring in adjuncts and lecturers for some of the GE and lower level courses, and it mixes. The line is not completely devoid of flexibility, but for the most part, yeah, I'm teaching some graduate school and some upper division courses.
Sure. Did you think like early in your career, your master's was from Central Florida?
Yes.
University.
Yes.
Were you planning on going into business and consulting, or did you have any inkling that you'd wind up in the academy when you did your master's?
No, I didn't. I shared this story. I had no inclination that I would go get a master's degree.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Some of the things that you saw when I was at San Jose State University as an undergrad, intercollegiate athlete, I played on the football team. My GPA was not great. So I didn't have an opportunity really to get a master's degree at all. If you want to have any type of understanding into my psyche at that point, I graduated with around a 2.5, 2.6. So I usually tell cautionary tales to my students. I don't say be like me. So when I graduated and decided that graduate school was the best next step for me. And nobody was on the other end of me calling to see if I could get admitted somewhere except for one school, Central Florida. And I will never forget, they said, while we cannot, under any circumstances, admit you fully, we will allow for you to prove yourself. So you can come down here on a probationary status and you can start taking classes. And it is our word that we will admit you if you prove yourself academically. So I got down there, I was 4.0 and then around 3.7, I think, to be accurate. And they fully admitted me, Pastor. They fully admitted me, Doc. The semester I graduated, I was fully admitted.
Wait. You were all but done with the degree when they admitted you.
Oh, I was done. Thesis was done. Everything was done. And I got a letter in the mail around the same time I had to apply for graduation that said, congratulations, you have been fully accepted into the Nicholson School of Communication.
Man.
I do not suggest people take that route, but I had to take it. I had to.
Sure, I certainly understand that, man. When I do meet young faculty, many times, they might be in business or sociology. I haven't met that many African American faculty members in public policy and public relations. And so, so are you somewhat of a trailblazer in that field at your university?
Yeah. In public relations, I'm the only Black faculty. I'm the only faculty member of color within public relations, and I also sit on the board for our Public Relations Society of America out here in the Bay Area. And of course, again, there's not a whole lot of representation. They are trying to, as many industries are trying to do, they're trying to have a diversity and inclusion push. But again, as we know, and we can talk about this a bit later, but again, you don't just snap your fingers and all of a sudden have representation.
Right.
There has to be a pipeline. And then you also have to unpack some of the systemic barriers to it becoming a pipeline. So not only there aren't very many men in public relations in general, let alone men of color within it, let alone people of color.
Right.
So again, for the most part, public relations is a white female dominated industry, if that gives you a bit of perspective.
Sure.
So no, there isn't.
Man. So I bet you have all kinds of perspectives as a professor of public relations about how race relations is being handled right now, what's happening with George Floyd right now, stuff the president's trying to do. I mean, this is like what you don't do for good public relations 101. So I bet you just watching stuff, just thinking, man, this is going to end up in somebody's textbook about what not to do. So how do you look at what's happening in the world through the lens of a sociologist, as a public relations professional, and what's going on, man? Are people playing it up? Are we not playing it up enough? How do you look at what's happening in terms of the racial climate in America for Black folks through a public relations lens?
Well, first of all, I have to approach it through the identity lens, meaning I'm a Black man who does public relations, and then I'm a Black man who now teaches public relations. So it's difficult to divorce those two when I'm looking at what's going on right now. So now trying to bring those two together, when I look at what's going on right now in the world, just go to some easy examples, Doc. When you look and see what happened at Lafayette Park the other day, when those peaceful protesters were met by tear gas and met by militarized armed personnel, simply so the president could walk across the street to take a photo op. Now, photo ops, that's what I do in PR. Right. I get that. So, but also understand that it was, and many cast it as a made-for-TV moment. I knew exactly what he was doing when I started to see it unfold. I knew why the press conference was delayed, because I would have delayed something that I'm waiting for the perfect condition to amplify my message. I would in PR, you wait for the perfect environment that's going to undergird your overall message. So I knew what he was doing. I told my wife, I said, it's purposeful that he's delaying this press conference. And I'm looking at CNN and MSNBC saying, I don't know why it's delayed. I knew I was delayed. He was waiting for something. And when I started to see the National Guard and the police officers starting to get themselves in position to push those peaceful protesters out of the way, I mean, with flashbangs, with tear gas, with unnecessary force, immediately he walked out. So now every national news network has a split screen of him talking law and order, and on the left side of that screen, you see protesters being pushed around. You see complete, as he mentioned, domination. That doesn't go haphazardly. That's public relations. That's crafting a narrative that He's speaking to someone, and we can talk about who he's speaking with later.
Wow.
But he's speaking to someone through that. And to an extent, it's you and me. But to a larger extent, it's to a much larger political base that he committed a narrative to.
Yes.
And as I mentioned, PR is a overarching environment, and your narrative has to follow through. And he did that. And there are countless examples of it that you're seeing right now. That's why certain things are said in the media to frame it. That is why you start to see certain images shown on television around the anarchy and chaos of protests and looting and all of these things, and they become conflated of this is anarchy. They don't even know what they want to do and who they want to be. They don't even have a rhyme behind this or a reason behind this rhyme. That's PR. That's all crafting a vision and a narrative that is for some audience. And we know who that audience is, but it's for some audience. All right. So PR, I have a tremendous reaction when I start to see some of those things. And that's one example, Doc. And I know you don't want me to keep going, but that's one example.
I did notice that he started saying the Wuhan virus again.
Oh, absolutely.
It wasn't called COVID-19 or the coronavirus. I can see examples of what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're talking about. So I'm curious if your world is like mine. Are your colleagues, and see, I work in a diverse organization that I've helped to create, so it's a little different. Mm-hmm. Are you getting calls and text messages from colleagues asking how you doing and do you want to talk, and they're standing with you? Is that coming from all across your campus?
Every single day. Every single day. On campus, off campus. I have folks reach out to me to get my thoughts on, as though I am the spokesperson for how to become a racially equitable society. I've had people ask me, and this is absolutely in your domain, Doc. I had people ask me about what my thoughts were on racism in the church, and I'm sitting here trying to wrap my mind around society at large. Right. And now we're getting into subtexts. We're getting into subgroups about racism. I have had so many, and somebody asked me how I felt, and I said exhausted.
That's a good description, Doctor.
And I said I am exhausted on so many different levels, but to answer your question, that's exhausting as well. When I feel as though I've always felt as though I had to represent my race.
Sure.
And I've always felt as though that was not something I could say no to. I don't care who tells me I don't have to do that and take that on. I feel that I have to, because I'm not given a choice from society. I represent you. You represent me.
Right.
In society's eyes, in terms of what I'll be able to do and what I won't be able to do moving forward. So from that standpoint, I've always felt as though I carried a certain burden in terms of representing my race in a productive way. And it's exhausting when you feel as though I have to speak and I have to educate many who don't want to understand. I had some folks reach out, and I'm crossed between whether you want me to let you off the hook with guilt, and there is a such thing as white guilt. I have had people to where I was not sure if it was sincere with them reaching out, because
particularly if they've never done it before, at least on that subject.
If they've never done it before, I've had people that when I reached out to them, and it wasn't just a thank you, I appreciate you thinking about me, but I leaned into it a bit, radio silence. And I've had some people that, quite honestly, they were confused about where they were as allies. And I know you had a previous conversation around allyship a while back, and that becomes a conversation. And ultimately, whether you choose to, and I was talking to a group of mine because they keep me sane. I have a group of good brothers that we work out in the morning together, and then we debrief about what's going on in the world right after we work out over Zoom, mind you. These brothers are back east. And I tell them, and I use the Mission Impossible sort of analogy, that if you so choose to take on this mission, there are some things that you're taking on. Meaning, if you choose to have a voice in this ongoing conversation about social justice, racial inequality, the disproportionality of how Black and brown faces are treated by police, if you choose to take on and weigh into this conversation about white privilege and Black Lives Matter, and when you want to know how many conversations I've had to try to have foundational conversations about why there's a need to highlight Black lives. And this is a week after we have visual confirmation that some don't feel that Black lives matter. That is emotionally exhausting. So I do have those moments to where I feel exhausted, and then I have opportunities to retool and recharge and practice self-care that I tell other people to practice. I have to do it as well. And I energize, I rally, and then I get right back on it.
And what does some of that self-care look like for you? Because you got to be there for your wife and your kids. So you can't let these folks who aren't serious gobble up all your time and energy, so that you're not whole when you got to be home. So it's exercise, like meditation, walking, and stuff like that.
You know what? I lean into it. I exercise. I jog a lot. And again, that we don't have to get into the physiological benefits of it, but I witness it all the time. The stress just lifts. I meditate. I pray. I'm a person of faith. So when all else fails and I don't understand what's happening next, and I can't explain to my daughter why she's saying what she's saying on television, and I can't help my wife through the confusing feelings that she's having because I'm confused. I take those things to a higher power, to the Lord in prayer that I believe in.
Gotcha.
And then I just unplug a lot of times. I will sit and play video games with my daughter and son, and I will joke around with them, and we will just have a very sort of childlike moment, and it gives me joy in order to do that. But then sometimes, Doc, I'm gonna be honest with you, and I could be a masochist when it comes down to whether I actually am giving myself a release, but man, I lean into some of the greats, some of the giants within social activism. Like I've been really heavy on James Baldwin over the last couple of years, and Nikki Giovanni, and some of their writings, and some of their, and it's empowering. It's empowering. It is. And I had a conversation with both of my parents last week. We talked collectively. I talked with them for 3 straight days, over 24 hours, because I was recording a conversation about their lives. And that was cathartic. That was cathartic for me, because I heard some of the things that they dealt with in terms of racism and inequality in St. Louis, Missouri, growing up in the 50s and the 60s, and the talents that they had, that it was not a choice whether they could go pursue some of the things that I was able to pursue. So that gives me optimism for myself as well as my children, that there has been some progress, even though we feel in this current moment that there is not, because I see the opportunities that generation provided for us. And while it may be slow, it does bring me optimism that we're moving slowly but surely.
And not only did they provide that opportunity for you, but they provided the motivation and instilled in you the confidence to take advantage of those opportunities. Absolutely. So they didn't just open a door; they helped to walk you to it, so that you could go through it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely,
man. It's interesting. I've been getting text messages from some of my white friends, white brothers, who are just saying, "Hey, man, I'm praying for you." One guy said, "I'm praying for your voice in our community," and I said, "What about praying for our voice?" They're not like I didn't think this was my problem, just like I didn't think global warming was yours or just mine. Mm-hmm. And I said, in fact, I don't need your prayers. I need your solidarity. He wrote back and said, yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I'm praying about solidarity. He's completely missing what I'm saying. I'm saying, man, don't be sending me these secret Nicodemus. Nicodemus was a fellow in the Bible, you all, who came to Jesus at night because he didn't want to be spotted hanging out with the rabble. But you're going to send me this message at night, man. Do something. Show up at something. Write something. But don't just send me these little text messages, these little secretive messages saying, standing with you. But man, I wonder if you're noticing this too with some of my white associates. They're struggling because they thought that they were woke or open because they knew me as sort of a safe Black person. And they're watching what's happened and the inability of their children to navigate this world because they're not able to do it. And when they're spiritual psychobabble, and I'm not saying prayer psychobabble, but I mean when you're just reciting things that aren't empowering, that you really don't believe, it does become something like a psychobabble. They get scared because they realize much of what they believed about themselves, the world, the nation, has been predicated on falsehood. And I'm seeing fear in their eyes. I'm hearing fear in their voices. I'm sensing fear in their text messages that they don't know how to navigate this world that has shifted. They could shift to safer at home, being quarantined, but this shift that they've been called to do that has to do with race and understanding the role in which it's played in the development of our country and how it's being exposed, man, they're acting like this is Armageddon. They don't even know how to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're in such a unique time in history. And I'm not just talking about, coming out of, and we're still in it, but this COVID-19 shelter in place, we're still trying to wrap our minds around that whole episode and where we even go from that. And then you see this happen, and you have Ahmaud Arbery, and you have George Floyd, and you have, and we keep forgetting, Breonna Taylor.
Yes, we do.
So, but specifically George Floyd, it stripped away some of the excuses because it was such a heinous act that was captured from all different angles, Doc. And with some of these other cases, there was a narrative that could be spun.
Yes.
Of somehow, some way, the victim perpetrated their own demise to a certain extent. So we were able to retreat to our own racial corners again. Well, George Floyd took that. That situation was stripped away. So some of those comforters that, and I'll say white people, but I've heard it from some non-whites, but specifically white people, it stripped away some of those comfort excuses and barriers that they were so easily able to gravitate towards, almost like a toolkit of racial excuses that they would just pull out. It was almost like we had a book and you just pulled them out. Ahmaud Arbery shouldn't have been doing this. And he was going into a vacant home and they called the police and this was justice served. And Trayvon Martin, he shouldn't have done this. And Breonna Taylor, to a certain extent, she shouldn't have done that. And so on and so forth. And Eric Gardner, he shouldn't have done this.
He shouldn't have been selling cigarettes.
He shouldn't have been selling cigarettes. He shouldn't have been bird watching in Central Park, as absurd as that sounds.
Right.
You stripped away a lot of that when you saw nearly 9 minutes of a total disregard for humanity.
Yes.
And no one can justify that. So now you have to turn around and face the world without those excuses, with them stripped away from it.
That's good.
So now we're standing here like we've been standing here the entire time, Doc. Saying we've been saying this the entire time. But the only thing that was stripped away were your excuses. So who you going to blame this time? So now you start to purge, because you purged some of those excuses. Now there's a scramble.
Right.
Because there are those who just don't want to be on the right side of history. So those are the ones that are on my Facebook feed, just deflecting. But how about this? How about that? How about the injured officers doing these riots? How about you burning down your own communities? How about this? How about that? All to escape the current and present situation.
Right.
And if you follow sports, Drew Brees ran into that same situation.
He walked it back, didn't he?
He walked it back like Michael Jackson. And when you look up and you say,
get that.
When you I knew you get it. When you look up and you say, what's at the core of this? Some people just do not want to understand. And again, I mentioned to you, I've been really heavy into James Baldwin the last couple of years, and it's so prophetic now, even more so than it was before.
Yeah.
But he has a quote that basically says, it's a lot easier for people to cry than to change. And
wow.
And when I overlay that with current circumstances and some of the people that I see reacting and reaching out to me, and a lot of it is hollow speak. A lot of it is a lot of build up without any follow through. So when I think back to your original question, where does this leave them? You have to be in one of those groups.
Yeah.
And not many want to be on the wrong side of history.
Right.
All right. However, just like you said with your counterpart that reached out to you, not many want to be that in the open. They want to send you a text.
Right.
They want to send you a private message. They want to send you something that doesn't put them in harm's way with their peers or whomever.
That's right.
They're pretending this sort of falsehood with. So I think it's such a fascinating sociological conversation when you talk about a generation of people, multiple generations of white people who have had countless excuses to justify the original sins of this nation. I mean, think about it, Doc. We had slavery was on this land before we had a government formed.
Right.
Before we had a government formed, slavery was on this land.
It helped the government to form. It gave them some money, gave them some cash to form it.
And how in your right mind are you able to ignore that for all these years, the systemic and socio-political and socio-economic ramifications that it has to that group that was enslaved? You have to try your best to ignore it. So now with this George Floyd situation, that's been stripped away, and you're seeing people scramble
right there in their face.
And I'm not going to be the one to give you another excuse. So I will sit there and allow people to show who they are, and they're doing it.
And they're showing it, man. They're showing who they are. I had a young guy call me today, and he just said, he's a young white gentleman. He lives in the South, and I'm friends with his parents. Mm-hmm. And he just said, I'm having to say goodbye to friendships. I'm telling people what happens when I ride in the car with my Black friends, with my Latino friends. He said, and people aren't listening to me, and they're telling me, what about the looting? What about hurting their own communities? He said, I thought I knew these people. And he said, and they're saying stuff that doesn't make sense to me. So there's a great awakening and uncovering amongst, at least within the white community, of who really is woke. Because this is a young guy who's just looking at stuff and saying, wait, these are my boys. Like, we paint together, we hang together, we do work together. Mm-hmm. And now you're going to drop some stuff like this, like they do this and they deserve this and they're ruining their own communities. And so you're right. This has done something that is not going to be easily rectifiable. White people are going to have to wrestle with this, and non-whites. I was in a chat like this with a group in Singapore, and they were talking about just their perceptions of Black men. Man, that's 7,000-8,000 miles away. Never been to America. Things that they hear while riding in a cab to the airport. You go into New York City, they got a lot of Black people there. Aren't you afraid? Isn't that dangerous? So we got people who have never even seen a Black person thinking that we're dangerous. And so white people, they're going to have to really wrestle with what George Floyd and that incident has put right in their faces, man.
It's stripping away years and years and years of an image that has been allowed to play out of who Black people are, what we're capable of, what we're not capable of. And this was an international narrative that was allowed to be perpetuated
Yes.
from America. I had a family friend who's from Spain, and she commented on one of my posts when I was explaining, like I feel like I tend to do, why we talk about Black Lives Matter and what that means. And she inboxed me and said, we were taught a very different history about Blacks in America over in Spain. And I said, I would be fascinated to hear about that. Because again, when you start to see in London and in Africa and in many of these countries, they're holding signs about a man whose life was taken thousands of miles away.
Yes.
And the power of the media, the power of public perception, you no longer own that. America no longer owns how we're viewed in these types of cases, because it was shown live in living color how we're treated here.
We have a PR issue.
Oh, you can't spin it. You can't spin that. You cannot spin that at all. So again, and I saw the other day,
man,
unfortunately, when George Floyd's daughter, she was on the shoulders of Steven Jackson, his friend, the NBA player.
Right.
And the video basically had both of them saying that her daddy changed the world. And to a large extent, that is very true. We get caught up in hyperbole a lot of times, but I don't think that's hyperbole. When you start to see and connect the dots of just how blatant his death was, that again stripped away a lot of these racial excuses as to why it was necessary for this person to be treated the way he was treated, and ultimately ended this person's life. The world got to see it, that the excuses are no longer what they used to be. And now you want to talk about an issue. You want to talk about a national problem for this whole systemic, inequitable system that has been perpetuated and hedged. That's a significant issue now. I just pray that it continues to play out in a productive way that leads to some substantive change.
That's my hope. I mean, I've been asked to step into some of these places where people have they have these communities, these online communities where it's social innovators, athletes, business leaders, and they're just trying to process life. And many of them are Asian-led, dominated, not Asian American. Like I'm talking to folks this morning, Singapore, Hong Kong, last night, South America and Hong Kong, and they're asking the hard questions. Well, why is America doing that? When can you put your history class online? And we want to learn more about history. When I started dropping information about how, because of the work of the Civil Rights Movement, the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965 was signed into order by LBJ so that people from Asia could come here, bring money, bring their family, and not be broken up. Their jaws dropped. They didn't know that my grandparents, your grandparents, marched and did things so that their grandparents could come to America. No one told them so that they could never partner with us. So I feel that folks that have been at odds with each other are going to be gravitating towards us. If nothing else, folks having signs of George Floyd in Syria, people in marches in Berlin, folks, it's going to make us realize somebody's got our back. If it's not our white Christian brothers and sisters, if it's not our white colleagues, somebody's got our back, and that's going to embolden us. So something good is going to come out of that, Dr. Fletcher. Seeing other people respond to the value of our Black lives.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Man. Listen, man, this time is going by so fast. I just got a couple other questions. Yeah. Will this feed into your curriculum? Your when students come back and you're beginning just to talk about. No, I'm sorry. Let me back up. I don't want to ask about your curriculum. I think, has this changed you as an individual, that maybe your teaching style or your approach to your work? is going to be somewhat different when your students are reassembled.
It has to be. It has to be. I owe it to more than myself in order to do that, in order to have a relevant curriculum that speaks to the times. And whether it's PR, whether it's sport communication, both of those disciplines are bound by the times. We don't live in the past. We don't live in the future. We live in the current time. So absolutely, that is going to impact curriculum. Shortly before I joined you, I partnered with a friend and a coworker of mine to hold a town hall for our Black students at San Jose State. And it was a powerful 2 hours that we had. And I asked them, I said, before we dive into an open discussion, I said, just jump in the chat and just throw out some adjectives of how you're feeling right now. And it would break your heart. Yeah. When I read through those, and I started reading them aloud as they were coming through, and it was depressed, it was angry, it was enraged, it was confused, it was sad. Some were, I'm motivated. And then it became, I'm empowered. And you could just see this mixture of emotions that are taking place within 18, 19, 20-year-olds who are on that thread. And we had a lot of people show up. I was very pleased to see it. And this is our Black student community on our campus that only comprises 3% of this predominantly white institution. So you want to talk about feeling isolated within a very, very precarious time in human history. I owe it to them. We owe it to them.
Yeah, we do. Yeah,
we owe it to them in order to not go on like it's business as usual. All right. And again, you want to talk about practicing what you preach. I cannot condemn my white colleagues and counterparts for supporting me in private, and I don't come into the open with this very current relevant knowledge and information and the age that we're living in right now with our curriculum. That brings that into the open. I could have as many side conversations as I want to, but until you start bringing that into the open, and not just in the open, remember, understand how all of this is interconnected. It's systemic.
Right.
When we talk about overturning the system and systemic injustice and systemic prejudice and systemic racism, higher education has a significant role.
Yes, it does.
A significant role in that. So
it's written the textbook on it, no pun intended.
Exactly. It has education is at the heart of it all. All right. And again, James Baldwin talks about that as well. I keep going back to him, but James Baldwin keeps talking about that when he talks about the paradox of education. When you begin to become conscious and examine the society that you're being educated in. I'm going to live that, and I'm living that every day on this campus of higher education. So not only, again, do I owe it to myself and my students, that is a larger watershed moment and opportunity to significantly impact this system that we talk about of inequity and racial injustice. I don't have to be an AFAM to talk about this. I don't have to be. And that's what we tend to rely and wait on our AFAM counterparts who are being cut dramatically across campuses in the United States. You can't find one on most campuses. So we can't sit back and wait for them. We can't sit back and wait for sociology. We all play our part. And it's not just educating the students on campuses because we know that the majority of our Black students are not on college campuses. But if you connect it all together with the work that we're doing and the work that our students are doing, then when they take that back to their communities, which are largely inner city communities and all up and down California, most of our Black students are from LA. So and then you move into Oakland and you move into some of these inner city areas, Doc, when we start to introduce these types of hard conversations about racial injustice and inequality, I don't care if you put a PR label on it or a sport comm major on it. I don't care what label you put on it, you're addressing it.
That's
and
good.
Now you start to create this wave that everyone else is trying to create around you, who are in the streets marching, who are trying to impact policy, who are trying to speak from their levels of social justice impact. We're then moving right in alignment with them. And when we start moving in alignment with each other from those different levels, there's no telling the power that we can possess to enact change. It gives me goosebumps thinking about it.
Man, I needed to hear some encouragement tonight. I needed to hear someone reinforcing the belief in the fact that we can be a part of creating and demanding systemic change. Man, that's powerful. Man, that is powerful. Do you have a podcast?
I am going to, if you see this beautiful mic here.
It is. I can tell you need one. You need one.
I'm actually working on a podcast now. It's going to really touch on the intersection of sport and society, and we'll be able to unpack some of these issues here. So again, I'm the type that I measure twice and cut once. So hopefully I'll be able to launch it in the next month or so. So you can have me back on and we can talk about that.
I would love to. Anything I can do to help you push it and promote it. And I will say, people are listening to us. They're finding this as a source of information and education. I broke my download record 3 times this week because white folks are just hitting this up.
Wow.
It's quadrupled since Monday. It's quadrupled. I haven't even seen the count. But by noon today, we beat what had previously been my record. And so folks are looking, and you just got a really clear and powerful voice, man. So listen, I really appreciate your time. I try to keep these just like, so it doesn't get too long, so people who are watching us on Facebook can stay with us. Dr. Fletcher, I appreciate you, man. I always have. But I really appreciate your mind, your commitment, the pride you have in being a person of faith, a Black man, your family, the academy. I like the way that you hold those things together while not losing yourself, but still you make it a point to talk about the need for men to take care of themselves, to address issues like mental stress, mental health issues. I like the fact that you bring all of those pieces in, that you're an athlete. And so it's just God has just really created you in a real unique way that gives you an opportunity to communicate on so many levels, man. So anything we can do to help you launch your podcast. Are you still playing around with the name? Do you want to throw it out there? Do you want to wait until everything's all ready?
Not yet. I'm in the PR world, so I like to unveil it. I like to unveil it. Yeah. So hang tight. I'll start to send communication out there. Folks can go to my website, SeanJFletcher.com, and I'll continue to update what I'm doing there. But again, I just want to take a moment to thank you. Voices cannot be heard unless they have channels through which to get their voices out there. And this is one of those channels that is unapologetically Black. And we don't have enough of those. And especially in this current time, we do need more of those. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that I appreciate it. So you continue to fight the good fight as well.
Man, I will. And please give my love to your wife and to
your
children, and keep taking care of yourself. And I saw a great picture of you and your mom dancing back. Must have been a throwback Thursday or something.
You're going to make me cry.
Okay, let's stop. But
you're going to make me cry.
And I can read between the lines of the post. I just thought, that's good. That's good. So if you think about it, would you please let Mr. Jose and Miss Edna know that I said hello? And
I absolutely will.
When you do talk with them. All right. So my guest has been Professor Shaun J. Fletcher from San Jose State in San Jose, California. And he's been dropping some wisdom. This young man is bringing a lot of heart and a lot of head to this subject. So I can't wait till this podcast comes out, because we need more voices that are out there. So thank you all again so much for supporting Black Like Me. And always, when you go to iTunes or wherever you go to get this podcast, write a review. Let people know what you're thinking about it. And as you listen to the episodes, share. And if you get an inclination to do so, you like it, click my Patreon link, because that helps us to do more work, to market more, and to grow our audience. A lot's going on in our world, and we are so glad that you stopped by here, both for the live and the studio podcast, to just get a sense of how Black people are successfully navigating this crazy space and this crazy time. So as always, folks, lean in, learn, experience some transformation, and then become a part of the change you want to see. So thank you again for being a part of Facebook Live on another Thursday.